Hey guys, tonight we're going back in time. But not just any time. We're dropping you right in the middle of a medieval castle, deep in the heart of the 14th century. Now, don't expect any fairy tale fluff here. There's no enchanted banquet, no shining armor waiting for you, and definitely no room service. You're not a noble. You're not even a knight. You're a groggy, underfed castle servant. And this is the worst day of your life. Pause your pillow fluffing for a second, like the video, and hit subscribe, but only if these whispered histories truly earn it. Every click keeps our lantern glowing, and your support genuinely fuels me to bring more drowsy tales. Now tell me what corner of the globe you're dozing in, and what hour the clock just sighed. You wake up on a bed of straw that's doing an alarmingly accurate impression of a bundle of thorns. Your back feels like it's been stabbed by 1,000 enthusiastic hedgehogs. There's a rat staring at you from the corner, unblinking, as if it's waiting to see what kind of servant you'll be today. The stone beneath you is cold, even through the thin rush matting. Basically, a polite way of saying dirt flooring, but fancier. Someone's already stolen your shoes. Not the fancy kind, just the half-rotted leather ones you tied together with scraps of wool last night. Welcome to castle life. A bell clanks far above you, echoing down through narrow stairwells. It's not melodic. It's not gentle. It's the medieval version of your iPhone alarm going off with a frying pan to the face. You sit up and immediately hit your head on the low timber beam above you. Oof, that's going to bruise. You mutter something in modern language that would probably be considered heresy here and shuffle toward the communal water bucket. It's not clean. You splash a bit on your face anyway, mostly out of principle. Through the slit in the stone wall, you can just barely see the early gray sky outside. Dawn is trying its best, but the sun looks like it had a rough night. There's a woman in the corner. She's already lacing up her bodice with one hand while eating yesterday's turnip with the other. Better hurry, she mumbles, around a mouthful of root vegetable. Cook's in a mood. Cook is always in a mood. You shuffle out, barefoot and grimacing, through a corridor that smells like smoke, wet wool, and ambition. A young boy runs past you holding a slop bucket. He's not looking where he's going. Splash. Now you smell like yesterday's soup and goat fur. You descend a staircase that has clearly never heard of even surfaces. Historians still argue whether medieval masons were brilliant or just didn't care about symmetry. Either way, your ankles don't appreciate the design. By the time you reach the servant's hearth, there's already a crowd of tired, soot-dusted people there. No one talks. Everyone looks equally miserable. You spot a familiar face. Old Tom, the gravedigger / turnip pickler. He gives you a nod that somehow says, "You'll survive." And you probably won't at the same time. The steward enters like a thundercloud in a tunic. He holds a scroll. That's never good. Laundry duty, torch relighting, pig washing. Who spilled mead last night in the chapel? Everyone points at everyone else. You don't even know where the chapel is, but somehow you're already on his list. And now, your first task of the day is waiting. Someone shoves a bucket in your hands. It leaks. Of course it does. You trudge toward the stable yard, shoes still missing, and the day hasn't even begun. But don't worry, it gets worse. You're barely outside the servants' quarters when the cold morning air sucker punches you in the throat. It's a special kind of chill, like wet parchment soaked in regret. The sun hasn't fully climbed above the castle walls yet, but its pale light is already reflecting off the frost-covered cobblestones, making everything just bright enough to hurt your eyes and just cold enough to make you wish you were still buried in that scratchy straw nest. In your hand is the bucket, the same leaky one from earlier, and a vague instruction echoing in your brain. Take this to the kitchen well and bring it back full. Quick. Simple, right? Well, here's the thing. Medieval directions are less like GPS and more like medieval riddles. You're not entirely sure which door leads to the kitchen yard, and every passageway seems to end in either a wall or a very angry-looking goose. After trying 3 different paths, one of which ends in a room filled entirely with potatoes and one suspicious monk, you finally find what must be the well. It's got a pulley system made from timber and what looks like someone's old belt. You lower the bucket, which immediately tips sideways and splashes half the water before it hits the surface. You yank it up, now half full and sloshing like a very nervous soup. By the time you hobble back toward the kitchens, your hands are numb and the bucket's leaked most of its contents onto your tunic, which now smells like mildew and mystery. You round a corner and slip. The last thing you see before going down is the shocked face of a kitchen maid and a chicken flying overhead like it's fleeing the crime scene. You land squarely on your backside. The bucket hits the stones with a hollow thunk, and the remaining water forms a sad little puddle next to your bootless foot. The maid gasps. A moment later, Cook appears. Now, Cook is not a man known for his warmth. His face resembles a boiled turnip left out in the sun, and his voice is like bacon grease sizzling directly into your ears. "What is this?" he bellows, arms crossed over his grease-stained apron. "Water," you say, helpfully. Then immediately regret that choice. His eyes narrow. "And how much of it are we supposed to cook with, pray tell?" "That puddle. Shall we stew the mud? Make soup from your own incompetence?" You want to disappear into the stones, but instead you apologize. Try to scoop the water back into the bucket with your hands. It doesn't work, and promise to fetch more. Cook waves you off like a bad smell. You're more used to the pigs, he mutters as he stomps back into the smoky kitchen. So off you go again, cheeks flushed with embarrassment and rear end sore from the fall. On the way back to the well, a guard snickers at you. "Lost your shoes, servant." "Yes," you mutter. "Try keeping your feet in 'em next time." He walks off laughing while you contemplate the chances of time travel malfunctioning and getting you out of this entire timeline. Historians still debate whether castle life was miserable for everyone, or just mostly miserable for anyone not born with a title. But judging by your current situation, frozen, wet, barefoot, and publicly mocked, it's not looking great for the average medieval intern. Eventually, you manage to fill the bucket again, successfully this time, and return it to the kitchens without another incident. Barely. A dog follows you the entire way, licking the side of the bucket like it's the finest soup in the realm. Back inside, you deposit the water, and the maid from earlier gives you a small nod of sympathy. "Don't mind him," she whispers, meaning Cook. "He once threw a cabbage at the king's courier." Before you can ask for details, because you very much want details, you're interrupted by a shout from down the corridor. "Breakfast line! Move or starve." You move, not quickly enough, apparently, because someone elbows you in the ribs as they pass. The breakfast queue is a single file line of hopeful faces and hollow stomachs. Steam rises from the kitchen cauldron in wisps, promising something warm. You imagine porridge, maybe stew. Even a crust of bread dipped in ale would be glorious. What you get is a wooden bowl half filled with what could charitably be described as brown mush. It smells vaguely of onions, very vaguely of barley, and unfortunately not vaguely enough of old socks. You thank the kitchen maid anyway, shuffle to a corner, and settle onto a bench with 3 legs and a wobble. The rat from earlier is back. You don't know how it got here. You don't ask questions anymore. You spoon the mush into your mouth. It's lukewarm. It's also kind of sour. You're not sure if that's intentional. The boy next to you looks over and grins. "Bit better than yesterday," he says, before biting into a hunk of bread so hard it echoes. You nod politely, even though your molar just threatened to resign. As you sit there, chewing slowly, a rooster crows outside with theatrical flair, as if it's announcing the comedy of your entire life so far. And it's only sunrise. You'd hoped breakfast might provide a spark of comfort, something warm and filling to help you face the rest of this very long medieval day. But no. The mush has settled in your stomach like a disappointed brick, and your tongue still tastes faintly of onion and ash. There's also a grain of something stuck in your back molar that refuses to move, no matter how many times you poke at it with your tongue. It's going to live there now, rent-free. The dining bench creaks beneath you as you stand up, joints cracking like old parchment. You shuffle back through the kitchen corridor, the scent of boiling stock and wood smoke clinging to your tunic. Somewhere overhead, footsteps echo through the wooden beams. A reminder that the castle is never fully quiet. Even at dawn, the place breathes. Clattering pots, shouting servants, guards dragging boots across stone. A distant cough that sounds suspiciously like the start of a plague subplot. You're told to report to the scullery, but before you get there, a thick-fingered man in a surcoat spots you. You, yes, you, good at polishing? He barks. No, you say instinctively, which earns you a raised eyebrow and a set of gauntlets shoved into your arms anyway. You are now. You're led into a room that smells like oiled leather, charcoal, and a lifetime of unmet expectations. Lining the walls are suits of armor in varying states of rust, dents, and grandeur. They look like sleeping giants, waiting to wake up and immediately punch you. "Make it shine," says the man. "If I can see your sorry reflection, you've done it right." You're handed a rough cloth and a jar of something viscous that smells like pine tar and broken dreams. You start scrubbing. It's slow going. The gauntlet you're working on has about 17 little grooves and plates, all designed by someone who clearly hated people with fingers. Your hands begin to ache almost immediately. Your arms join them a few minutes later. Somewhere deep in your shoulder, a muscle you didn't know existed lets out a whimper. You're halfway through a breastplate when a shadow falls across the room. You look up and instantly regret it. A knight, an actual knight, in partial armor, broad-shouldered and scowling like someone who just discovered the soup was made from yesterday's mop water. He glances at your handiwork and snorts. "Is this how you show respect to the tools of honor?" he says. You blink. You weren't aware this dented, grease-splotched chest plate was a sacred relic. I just started... I can tell, he interrupts. He leans down and swipes a finger across the metal, inspecting the residue like it's a crime scene. This would get you whipped in the field, he mutters. Then, with no warning, he flicks the cloth at your face. It doesn't hurt, but the gesture hits harder than any slap. You apologize. Again, it's becoming a reflex. The knight straightens, muttering something about standards and lazy whelps before clanking off down the hall. You exhale, only now realizing you've been holding your breath. Historians still argue whether knights in private were truly as chivalrous as their public image suggested. If your encounter is any indication, the answer might involve more cloth flicks and passive-aggressive lectures than romantic ballads would admit. You return to polishing, now more out of fear than pride. Eventually, the same thick-fingered man returns and grunts something that sounds vaguely like good enough. Your next task? Deliver a message to the steward's office in the West Tower. You're handed a folded note sealed with wax and no directions whatsoever. West Tower, he says again. Like that explains everything. You nod like you understand. You don't. The castle's layout is a maze. Spiral staircases, dead-end corridors, half-finished annexes, secret passageways that probably lead to Narnia, or a forgotten chamber pot collection. Every hallway looks the same. Gray stones, wooden beams, the occasional soot smudge that may or may not be shaped like a chicken. You climb a narrow set of stairs that twists like a drunk serpent. After 3 rotations, you swear you've passed the same arrow slit 3 times. You try another path and end up in a room filled with barrels and one sleepy-looking guard who raises an eyebrow and says, "No stewards here, just pickled fish." Of course. Eventually, after enough wandering to count as cardio, you locate a doorway with a creaking wooden sign above it. Steward's quarters. You knock, enter, and deliver the note to a thin man with ink-stained fingers and an expression that screams, "I'd rather be anywhere else." He doesn't thank you. He doesn't even look up. He just snatches the note, mutters something about handwriting, and waves you away like an inconvenient breeze. On the way back, you take a wrong turn and find yourself standing in front of the castle's small chapel. A priest is sweeping the stone floor with what looks like a bundle of twigs tied together with thread. He pauses and eyes you. "You look lost," he says. "Always," you reply. He nods, like that's the most honest thing anyone's told him all week. Back in the servants' corridor, you pass a row of laundry hanging on a rope line. Someone's undergarments flap directly into your face. Of course they do. You finally return to the central hearth just in time for the next round of instructions. There's no good job. No thank you. Just another assignment and a dismissive grunt. Castle life, it seems, doesn't reward effort so much as tolerate survival. And you're only halfway through the morning. By now, you've accepted that dignity isn't part of your job description. You've delivered water, been scolded by cook, nearly concussed by a suit of armor, got lost in a tower, hit in the face with laundry, and you're still not sure if anyone here knows your name. But there's no time to reflect. A steward marches into the hearth room where you're catching your breath and barks out a fresh order. Knight's gear needs wiping. You. Yes, you with the hay in your hair. That's you, obviously. Still hay. Still hair. Before you can respond, you're led down a side corridor that smells strongly of iron, sweat, and competitive masculinity. It's the arming room, and it's filled with knights in various states of preparation and undress, polishing chainmail, oiling boots, and shouting unnecessarily about their family crests. You're handed another cloth and directed to polish a different set of armor, this time for Sir Gerald of something sounding important. You get to work on the Greaves. You wipe and polish. And eventually, without trying, you sneeze directly onto the piece you just finished. Sir Gerald notices. He is not amused. Is that how you show respect to a man's lower legs? He asks. You stammer. He sighs. I've worn these in 2 real battles. That cloth is older than yours. And now, sneeze. He takes the greave from you, sniffs it once. Why? And then sets it down like it's contaminated. I'll be repolishing this myself, he mutters. Go fetch the surcoat. What now? He gestures toward a pile of fabric near a bench. You shuffle over and grab the tunic-like outer layer embroidered with his crest. It's heavy with dried sweat and a smell that historians would charitably label robust. You hand it over, trying not to wince. He takes it and immediately begins muttering about how squires these days don't know what chivalry smells like. As he leaves, another knight walks by and pats you sympathetically on the shoulder. Don't worry, he says. Gerald's just made the stables and didn't name a foal after him this season. You want to laugh, but you're too tired. A few minutes later, you're reassigned to cleaning wooden shields. They're covered in dents, splinters, and faded paint. One of them has what looks like a meat pie stain in the center. Another bears a crude drawing of what might be a duck wearing a crown. You don't ask questions anymore. As you scrub the shields, you overhear nearby knights debating the proper angle of a sword feint. One insists that 17 degrees is optimal. Another claims 22 degrees with wrist flare. Historians still argue whether the wrist flare was necessary, one mutters under his breath, imitating a bored scribe. You smile, even if your arms are turning to jelly. You're deep in thought, wondering how exactly you got from your warm bed in the 21st century to this medieval purgatory, when a sharp voice breaks through the clatter of armor. Servant, you've left a fingerprint. You spin around. A different knight is holding up a polished helmet, staring at a single faint smudge near the visor, like it personally insulted his lineage. You step forward to clean it. He holds the helmet out, and then, with impeccable passive aggression, uses the tip of his gauntlet to wipe the smudge himself. There, he says. That wasn't so hard. Then he walks off. You whisper a quiet apology to the helmet. Eventually, your shift ends. Not with a bell, but with the arming squire muttering, "You're dismissed," while elbow deep in chainmail grease. You return your cloth, which is now stiff, brown, and emotionally scarred. As you leave the arming hall, you catch a glimpse of the castle courtyard. A group of children are chasing a goose in what appears to be a very serious reenactment of a military maneuver. The goose is winning. You make your way back through the inner corridor. The windows here are just narrow arrow slits, but one lets in a sliver of golden sunlight. For a brief second, it catches in the dust of the hallway and makes the air glow. You pause, just long enough to feel like a human again. And then someone behind you shouts, "Why are you standing? Move!" Right. You shuffle forward, tired, aching, and somehow already hungry again. It's not even noon. You've barely had time to convince your spine to stop sulking when you're handed another task. Deliver a sealed pouch to the steward's office in the West Tower, again. Apparently, this castle has only one direction, west. This time, you're feeling bold. You've been to the West Tower before? You remember the hallway, the crooked staircase, the disturbing fresco of a man wrestling a duck. Classic medieval decoration. You nod, take the pouch, and stride forward with confidence. You get lost anyway. Somehow, you end up in a storage room filled with firewood, a broken spinning wheel, and what you're fairly certain is a taxidermied cat wearing a bishop's hat. You apologize to the room and back out slowly. Eventually, after retracing your steps past the hall of old tapestries, two of which depict mysterious animals that might just be extremely inaccurate lions, you find the tower stairs. You climb, again, each step, reminding your legs that this is a terrible time period for footwear innovation. At last, you reach the steward's office. You knock, push open the heavy door, and freeze. It's not the steward, it's his apprentice, who is about your age and clearly resents your existence. He looks up from a pile of scrolls and sighs like you've ruined his afternoon simply by continuing to breathe oxygen. What now? You hold out the pouch. He takes it with 2 fingers, like you might be contagious. "Sit," he says, pointing to a stool that looks like it lost a fight with a bear. You're early. He's not here yet. You sit. The stool wobbles. For a while, there's silence. He scribbles. You breathe. He scribbles more. You attempt to scratch your knee discreetly. He sighs louder. "Do you know why that seal was red and not blue?" he asks suddenly. You blink. No? "Exactly," he says, as if you've confirmed everything wrong with the universe. Eventually, the steward arrives, mutters a thank you, and tells you to go help with the noonday bell, whatever that means. You ask a passing guard. He points vaguely upward. "Just follow the rope." Ah, yes, the classic follow the rope instruction. You do, and it leads you to the small bell tower atop the chapel, another staircase, another aching calf. The bell is larger than expected, and the rope is rough and fraying, like everything else in this castle. You pull. It resists. You pull again. It moves, begrudgingly. The bell tolls. Loudly. Right into your ears. It echoes across the courtyard, bouncing off stone walls and into every corner of your aching brain. It tolls again, and again, and again. Finally, someone below waves at you to stop. You let go of the rope. It snaps upward and smacks your palm on the way past. Of course it does. On your way down, you pass by a group of guards sharpening halberds and laughing about someone who fell into the moat last week. They pause to glance at you. "Hey, it's the bucket boy," one of them says. "How's water duty?" You nod politely and continue walking. Your dignity has officially left the building. By the time you reach the central courtyard, it's teeming with life. Servants rush back and forth with trays and cloth. A goat is standing on a barrel for no reason. A cat is chasing a frog. A small child is yelling about dragons. Standard midday energy. You're directed toward the kitchen for lunch, but not to eat. To serve, they clarify, as if you needed the clarification. You step into the kitchen, where the heat is overwhelming and the noise even more so. The cook is barking orders. Pots are boiling. Bread is rising. Something is burning, and no one knows what. You're handed a tray with 3 pewter bowls, all sloshing with soup that smells like cabbage and fatigue. You're told to bring them to the outer hall. Left table, second bench. Sounds simple. You make it 6 steps before someone bumps into you. Soup spills. The tray wobbles. You save it, barely. You deliver the bowls to the correct table, or at least a table. It's occupied, so you assume it's fine. "That's not ours," says a large man with a forehead like a battering ram. You hesitate. "It is now," he decides, grabbing the bowls. You return to the kitchen, get another tray, and do the whole dance again, and again, and again. Lunch in a medieval castle isn't a relaxing affair. It's loud, it's sweaty, it smells like every ingredient you've ever regretted, and you're not even allowed to eat unless cook feels generous, which, historically, he does not. Eventually, you're given a crust of bread and told to eat fast, then mop. You find a corner. You chew. The bread is so hard, you begin to understand why the average peasant had fewer teeth than shoes. You mop. The floor has seen things. Spilled mead, soggy cabbage, a single eel you chase under a table. You think about naming it. Then it disappears. Somewhere, a minstrel begins tuning a lute. Off key. It's officially afternoon. You've polished armor, gotten lost, pulled a bell, spilled soup, and mopped under a table for an eel that doesn't pay rent. You're starting to suspect that surviving one day in a medieval castle is an achievement no one truly unlocks. If there's one thing you've learned by now, it's that rest is not a concept widely respected in medieval castle life. The moment you set down the mop and dare to stretch your aching back, a steward claps his hands and calls your name, or, rather, something vaguely resembling your name, but with fewer vowels and more contempt. "You're due in the Great Hall," he says. "They need another runner." You don't even ask what you'll be running. You just nod and shuffle toward your next responsibility, like a very obedient bag of bones. The Great Hall is the heart of the castle. At least that's what the banners say. But from where you're standing, it looks more like a mildly chaotic indoor festival, hosted by people who've never heard of personal space. It's a massive room. High vaulted ceilings, dusty stained glass windows, long trestle tables filled with wooden trenchers and leftover lunch crumbs. There's a fireplace so large you could walk into it, assuming it wasn't currently hosting a crackling inferno, and at least 3 roasting animals on spits. The air smells like smoke, sweat, and ambition. You're handed a fresh tray. More soup, more bread, and what might be some kind of roasted root vegetable, and directed toward the dais, where the lord and lady are seated. Their table is raised on a small wooden platform, adorned with fancier bowls and an even fancier tablecloth. There's also a jester nearby, balancing a pear on his forehead and humming to himself like he's seen some things. You approach carefully. Don't trip. Don't spill. Don't trip. You almost trip, but you don't. Success. You place the tray in front of the lady, who doesn't look at you but does whisper something to her handmaid that results in quiet laughter. You're 73% sure it's about your hair. As you turn to leave, someone grabs your sleeve. It's the steward again. You sat on the wrong stool earlier, he says with grim finality. You blink. I didn't sit. Yes, he says, but had you sat, it would have been the wrong one. Ah, preemptive reprimand. Efficient. He gestures to a bench on the far side of the hall. Sit there. Not now. Later, if needed. You nod. Obedient. Confused. Historians still debate whether seating order in medieval castles was truly about hierarchy, or just a game of musical chairs with permanent consequences. Either way, you're not eager to test it. Your next assignment comes quickly. Refill wine goblets. You take the pitcher, which is almost as heavy as your entire arm, and begin making the rounds. The goblets are all different sizes. Some are ornate. Some are chipped. One is a wooden cup that smells suspiciously like pickled fish. But everyone wants theirs full. And everyone has an opinion about how full is full. That's enough, says one man after you've poured barely a sip. You call that a pour? Says another after you've nearly filled him to the brim. You cannot win. Somewhere near the center of the hall, a lute player begins plucking out a tune that's either a love song or a dirge. Hard to tell. A group of minor nobles starts arguing over who owns which field near the east wall. The argument involves lots of gesturing, a suspicious number of actuallys, and a reference to someone's great-uncle's sheep. At one point, you hear someone mention a duck tax. You don't ask. Eventually, a child runs through the hall, chasing a dog. The dog is chasing a pheasant. The pheasant is chasing a fly. The fly is winning. You try to stay out of the way, which lands you in the exact path of a very loud knight who insists he remembers you from earlier. You're the one who sneezed on Gerald's Greaves. Word travels fast in castles, apparently. You smile politely. He winks. No shame in it. Gerald's Greaves deserved it. You laugh softly. He slaps you on the back. You stumble. Somehow, through sheer luck or divine pity, you survive the wine service without spilling a single drop. You set the pitcher down near the hearth and exhale a breath so deep your ribs protest. A servant nearby offers you a scrap of bread. You take it gratefully. It's stale, but edible, mostly. You sit, carefully, on a small stool that looks safe. The steward glares, but doesn't stop you. For a moment, there's quiet. The fire pops. Someone coughs. The dog from earlier curls up by the hearth. You lean back against the stone wall and allow your eyelids to droop just a little. Just for a moment. You made it through lunch, through the great hall, through the wine, through the nobles. But the day isn't done. Because the castle still has towers to climb, floors to scrub, and secrets to overhear. And you're not even halfway through your chores. The moment your eyelids finally begin to flirt with rest, someone shouts your name. Well, the version of your name that's now more of a grumble than an actual word. You jolt upright, almost knocking your stale bread onto the dog by the hearth. The dog glares at you like you've interrupted its dissertation on napping. Up, barks the steward. You've been assigned to etiquette duties. Etiquette. That's a word you didn't expect to fear until now. You're escorted out of the great hall and down a quieter corridor, one lined with faded tapestries depicting knights doing knightly things, slaying dragons, frowning at scrolls, marrying ladies with unnaturally long necks. You're ushered into a modest room filled with long wooden benches and a chalkboard covered in confusing symbols. At the front stands Mistress Alfreda, the castle's etiquette instructor, a woman with perfect posture and the soul of a military drill sergeant in a bonnet. She eyes you like a hawk, considering whether to bother with a mouse. "You will be assisting," she says crisply. "Quietly." You nod. Quiet is your specialty at this point. As the other servants file in, nervous, hunched, clutching bits of cloth as if they might protect them, you're handed a practice tray with wooden goblets and a cloth napkin. Your job, apparently, is to model correct posture and tray technique. What follows is an hour of intense scrutiny, whispered corrections, and what can only be described as the medieval walking Olympics. You're walking like your knees are full of bees. Mistress Alfreda snaps at a lanky boy. "Bow lower," she tells a girl. "No, lower. You are not the Pope." You're told to walk, bow, backpedal, turn left, present the tray, step aside, curtsy with one foot only, and then, this is key, smile without showing your teeth. You try. You fail. She looks at you like you've just insulted her great-grandmother's embroidery. "There is a reason we don't allow you people in court," she mutters. At one point, a noble child wanders in, watches for 5 seconds, and declares, "This is boring," before being promptly escorted out. You envy him deeply. Halfway through the session, someone drops a goblet. It rolls dramatically across the stone floor, colliding with your foot. You freeze. All eyes are on you. You bend, pick it up, and attempt to smile in the approved toothless way. Mistress Alfreda squints. "Better," she says. "Still awful, but better." Historians still argue whether etiquette training was meant to inspire discipline or simply humiliate everyone equally. After today, you're leaning toward the latter. Eventually, the session ends. You're dismissed with a wave and a whisper, "Try not to embarrass us in public." No promises. You're released into the courtyard just in time to be volunteered for another duty, standing guard duty on the outer wall. You protest very gently. "I'm not trained, or armed, or brave." "That's fine," says the guard assigning you. "You're just meant to look alert. It's more about the atmosphere." Atmosphere. Great. You're handed a long spear with a chipped point and a helmet that's definitely too big. It settles over your ears like a rusty bell, and you have to keep tilting your head back to see where you're going. The walk up to the outer wall is another staircase, this one steep, narrow, and haunted by the ghost of leg days past. You emerge onto the battlements, where the wind greets you like an angry relative. From up here, the view is oddly beautiful. Rolling hills, a distant tree line, the shimmer of a nearby river. It's easy to forget that inside the castle, someone is probably yelling about eel stew or misaligned napkins. You're placed next to an actual guard, who looks about as excited as a wet chicken. He hands you a tin cup of something hot and sour, then proceeds to ignore you completely. So you stand there, spear in hand, helmet slipping, wind howling, and birds start to arrive. One lands on your spear, another on your shoulder. They like quiet ones, the guard mutters. You nod, too afraid to move in case the birds decide to form a council. Eventually, a bugle sounds in the distance. No threat, just a hunting party returning. You're dismissed from wall duty with a grunt. On your way down, your helmet slips and clonks you on the nose. Classic. You return to the courtyard with ringing ears and a mild concussion of pride. You're sent to the water trough to wash your hands. And while you're there, someone offers you a warm cloth. You smell like a pigeon, they say. You can't even argue. It's now mid-afternoon. You've survived etiquette class, modeled tray holding, stood guard in a wind tunnel, and made polite conversation with birds. You're starting to suspect you might just make it through this day. But only just. The castle bells toll again. 4 long, sleepy chimes that echo off every stone wall and tower peak. You've come to recognize them as the medieval version of a smartphone push notification. Time to suffer in a new and exciting way. A steward emerges from the inner yard and calls out, "Stable help needed. Now." You don't even try to hide this time. You just step forward and say, "Yes, that's me." Because it is. Of course it is. You're led through a side gate into the castle's stable yard, where a wall of smells hits you with stunning efficiency. Wet hay, horse sweat, damp leather, and something you choose to believe is just extra earthy turnips. A stable boy, about half your height and twice your energy, tosses you a pitchfork. It's splintered and somehow manages to be both too long and too short. He grins. "Just don't stand behind the gray one. He kicks." You nod solemnly. You and the gray one are already not on speaking terms. Your task? Muck duty. The floor of the stables is a layered archaeological dig of straw, mud, and very opinionated horse droppings. You begin shoveling, trying not to inhale too deeply. Within 5 minutes, your arms ache. Your boots are no longer the same color, and you've been stepped on by a chicken. Twice. You try to bond with the animals. You mutter encouraging things like, "Nice hooves," and strong tail work, but they just stare at you, except the gray one. The gray one definitely contemplates murder. While you shovel, you overhear a stable hand telling a story about a noble who tried to ride a boar into battle. He nearly lost an ear, the boy says proudly. The boars, not the knights. You smile. You cough. You shovel some more. Eventually, you're told to fetch fresh hay from the back barn. This sounds easy. It is not. The barn is stacked with bales, some compact, some unraveling like sleepy porcupines, and they weigh more than your entire existential willpower. You drag one across the yard, slowly, heroically. A mouse runs out from it and gives you a look that says, "Really?" Historians still argue whether medieval animal care was based on true affection or the sheer fear of being kicked across a courtyard. Judging by the bruising forming on your shins, you vote fear. After an hour of mucking and hay hauling, you're promoted to hoof scrubbing. Let's be clear. You have never scrubbed a hoof in your life. You're not even sure which end to hold. A kind old groom shows you, mostly with hand gestures and increasingly concerned facial expressions. You kneel. You lift the hoof. The The horse allows it, mostly out of pity. You scrub. You're doing okay, until the goat shows up. Yes, the castle goat. It wanders in like it owns the place and immediately starts nibbling the edge of your tunic. You try to gently shoo it away. It is an offense. It climbs onto a bale of hay and stares at you with the quiet judgment of an angry librarian. The horse kicks once, not at you, thankfully, and you decide hoof time is over. Back outside, you rinse your hands in a bucket so murky you'd rather not know what it's been used for. You're offered a crust of barley bread by the same kid who handed you the pitchfork. He's got straw in his hair and no visible concern for anything. "This is a good day," he says cheerfully. You nod. The wind howls. A chicken screams in the distance. Sure, good day. Then comes the afternoon etiquette refresher. Yes, another one. Apparently, the castle is preparing for a visiting noble in the next few days, and every servant must now know how to walk while balancing a tray, holding eye contact, bowing with precise knee placement, and not making any jokes unless directly instructed to do so. You repeat the bow, and again. Now with a tray, now with a goblet, now with a goblet and a coin balanced on your head. You drop the coin. Everyone sighs. You consider joining the chicken in whatever rebellion it's planning. Later, you're sent to help hang banners in the small feast hall. It's a task that sounds elegant until you realize it means climbing a rickety wooden ladder, balancing on one foot, and hammering a metal hook into a wall that's older than time. You hammer once. The ladder wobbles. You hammer again. Dust falls into your eye. You hammer a third time, and the hook goes in. Victory. You climb down. You exhale. The steward glances up and says, "That's the wrong banner." Of course it is. You climb back up. Change it. Try again. The correct banner shows the family crest. 2 fish fighting over a crown. It's majestic and confusing. As the sun begins to drift toward the horizon, the feast preparations intensify. Trays are arranged. Candles are counted. A cat walks through the center of the hall and is immediately carried out by someone with a feather duster and a strong sense of personal boundaries. You're dismissed for now, with the stern reminder to report to the feast an hour before it begins. You nod. You shuffle away. And for a brief, fleeting moment, you sit on a stone bench outside the kitchens, your fingers still smelling faintly of horse, and you watch the last of the afternoon light spill over the turrets. Somehow, you're still standing. The feast is still an hour away, but castle time doesn't operate like normal time. An hour, in castle terms, means you should have already been there, and also scrubbed the entire floor. You report to the outer kitchen, where activity is peaking. It's chaos, controlled, aromatic, poultry-flavored chaos. Smoke curls from the hearths. Boiling pots hiss and rattle. Spices waft through the air in combinations both heavenly and suspicious. You spot cinnamon, cloves, garlic, something green that may be mint, or moss, and a kitchen boy attempting to season an eel that is still somewhat alive. You're immediately handed a tray of pewter mugs and told to walk like a noble's shadow, silent, graceful, invisible, and never too far away. Okay, sure. You can definitely pretend to be a shadow. Shadows don't trip over firewood, after all. The outer hall has already begun filling with castle officials, minor nobles, and people who hold vague titles like Keeper of the Drapes. They chatter in clusters, comparing heraldry, elbowing each other for better seats, and loudly pretending not to notice who's being seated closer to the dais. Your job? Keep their drinks full. It's harder than it sounds. Each time you approach a table, someone turns abruptly. A sleeve knocks your arm. A goblet tilts. You perform mid-air miracles to avoid spilling on velvet. The wine flows. So does the mead. You begin to realize that your tray is not nearly big enough for the number of refills being demanded. Someone gestures impatiently. You nod and scamper back to the casks. As you pass a servant girl balancing a full roast duck on one hand, she mutters, "Don't look at anyone too long, especially not Sir Ulric. He thinks eye contact means you're challenging him." Good to know. Back in the kitchen, a steward is screaming about missing garnishes. Someone else is frantically carving turnips into the shape of mythical beasts. There's a particularly sad attempt at a griffin. You refill your tray and return to the hall. At one point, a minor noble asks for less mead and more poetry. You don't know what that means, so you just nod and smile without showing teeth, your new default expression. The evening is ramping up. A lute begins to play, tentatively, like it's not sure if it's welcome here. Then louder. The bard starts singing. It's a love song, you think, or possibly a fishing lament. Hard to tell. Historians still debate whether medieval feasts were primarily for celebration, diplomacy, or just a socially acceptable excuse to eat 4 types of bird in one sitting. Tonight, it feels like all 3. You're told to serve the high table. This is the big leagues. The lord, the lady, their guests, their egos. You approach carefully, head slightly bowed, steps measured, tray steady. You offer a goblet to the lady first, always the lady first, and she accepts it with a nod, so subtle it might have just been a blink. You offer a second goblet to the guest seated beside her. He's large. He's loud. He's already drunk. As he takes the cup, he leans in and booms. You look like the type who'd forget where the wine came from. You blink. "The cellar, my lord?" He laughs so hard he spills half the cup. "Quick thinker!" he bellows, slapping your back hard enough to dislodge your thoughts. You shuffle away, deeply thankful to still be upright. An hour passes in a blur of footsteps, polite nods, near disasters, and one actual disaster involving a roast pig, a rolling trencher, and a trip hazard named Cedric. You find a moment to breathe near the fireplace. Another servant, slightly older and entirely done with life, leans next to you. "Don't stand still too long," he says, not unkindly. "They'll think you've died, and you won't like what happens after that." Duly noted. You return to the tables. Someone wants more bread. Someone else is asking about apples. You're not even sure if there are apples in this season. You promise to check and then forget immediately. You catch the eye of the steward across the room. He gives a single nod. It's not praise exactly, but it's the medieval equivalent of a LinkedIn endorsement. As the main course winds down, the noise increases. There's laughter, song, clapping. Someone begins clanging a spoon against a mug in rhythm. Others join in. For a moment, it's almost fun. Then Sir Ulric stands up. You remember Sir Ulric, the one you were warned not to make eye contact with? Yeah, he's speaking now. He launches into a rambling, semi-poetic toast about honor, family, and the noble sacrifice of his uncle, who once tamed a particularly aggressive goose. You nod along politely while pouring more wine. Suddenly, a knife lands on the table. Just thunk into the wood. Sir Ulric howls with laughter. Just a jest, he bellows. Only a jest. No one else laughs. You back away slowly. Feast duty continues into what feels like the next century. Candles burn low. Meat bones pile high. Someone is playing dice under the table. A dog walks past wearing a child's bonnet. You don't question it. Finally, someone rings the small iron triangle near the kitchen archway. That's the signal. Feast over. Cleanup begins. You're handed a cloth. You begin wiping down the tables. The wooden surface is sticky with wine, grease, something that looks like mashed turnip, and a suspicious feather. You scrape. You mop. You gather goblets and stack trenchers. One tip. You catch it. Your reflexes are now faster than your thoughts. The hall begins to empty. Laughter turns to murmurs. Footsteps fade into the corridors. You light one last candle for the chapel entrance and hand a final tray to the steward. He nods. You didn't embarrass yourself, he says. High praise. You take it and breathe. You think, for just a moment, that the day might finally be winding down. The feast is over. The hall is mostly quiet. Most of the nobles have shuffled off to their chambers, sleepily muttering about digestion and honor. Even Sir Ulric has slumped into a chair, mumbling a song that might be about onions, or possibly betrayal. You're standing beside a stack of trays, trying to figure out if your legs are still attached, when the steward appears once again. Of course he does. You, he says, pointing as if there's any doubt. We're short on firewood. Go fetch more from the supply shed and take the lantern. The last boy tripped into a barrel of pickled cabbage. Great. You collect the lantern, a clunky iron cage with a candle that flickers like it's scared of its own shadow, and step out into the castle yard at night. Everything's changed. The clamor of the day is gone. The sky is vast and deep and dark, filled with stars that don't twinkle so much as stare. Cold air settles on your skin like a wet cloak. The wind howls through the crenellations. Somewhere, an owl hoots ominously. A second later, something hoots back. You're not sure it was another owl. The castle feels older now, less like a home, more like a breathing monument. You follow the path toward the woodshed, the lantern swinging in your hand and casting long, twitchy shadows across the cobbles. The pile of firewood is stacked beside a crumbling outer wall. You begin loading an armful, careful not to drop the pieces when... clatter. Behind you, you freeze. The lantern flame flickers. You turn. A dog. Just a dog. It trots past, tail wagging lazily, as if you're the one being suspicious. You return to your task. Gather, stack, carry. You walk back slowly, mindful of the uneven ground, and deliver the bundle to the kitchen hearth, where a woman with soot-covered cheeks takes it without a word and tosses a log into the flames. You're dismissed again, But before you can even contemplate sitting down, another servant grabs your sleeve. They need help in the upper chambers. You nod. Of course they do. The upper chambers are where the nobles sleep, and where you are now expected to tread lightly, carry things without clinking, and most importantly, not speak unless spoken to. You climb yet another spiral staircase. By now, your legs have developed their own personalities, and neither of them like you. The chambers are dimly lit. Heavy tapestries drape over stone walls, muffling every sound except your heartbeat and the soft shuffle of your own feet. You pass one open door and glimpse a room with 4 beds, a fire already glowing inside, and 2 handmaidens fussing with embroidered linens. You're handed a tray with warmed stones. Yes, stones, and told to place them gently beneath the bedding, footside. It's an odd job, but one that makes sense. Castles are freezing at night, and the nobility has delicate toes, apparently. You move from room to room, carefully sliding the warmed stones beneath heavy feather mattresses. The rooms smell of beeswax, lavender, and pride. In one chamber, a noble woman is brushing her hair, long, silver, glowing in the firelight. She sees you and says nothing. Just nod once. You nod back. It feels strangely profound. As you back out of her room, a voice calls from the end of the hall. It's the steward. Again. You forgot the candle. You pause. Which candle? He points to a small beeswax taper on a side table. That one. It must be extinguished after the second bell. Of course, you step forward and gently pinch the wick. It sputters. Go out. The room darkens, lit now only by the fading coals of the hearth. The steward nods. Now, the East Tower. Of course, the East Tower. Why not? You climb again. Fewer stairs this time, but steeper. They creak underfoot. You arrive at a turret chamber that looks out over the valley. It's quiet, still. There's a window slit showing the moon rising above the hills. You stand there a moment. Not because anyone told you to. Just to breathe. To feel the night air brush across your cheeks. To realize that, somehow, you've made it through the hardest parts of the day. You light a taper on the chamber wall and leave it flickering gently. Then you descend the stairs, slower this time, deliberate, balanced. Back in the main corridor, you pass a mirror, tarnished, but just clear enough to see your reflection. You look like someone who's been through a lot. Hair tousled, cheeks smudged, eyes heavy, but still here, still standing. You head back toward the servants' quarters. No one stops you. For the first time all day, no one calls your name. The silence is a gift. The stone halls seem to soften. Even the floor feels a little more forgiving beneath your aching feet. You push open the door to your chamber. The same one with the straw mat, the rat who may or may not be your roommate, and the cold corner that somehow now feels familiar. You exhale, long and slow, and sit, just for a moment, before the final chores begin. Eyes fluttering shut, for what you hope is just a resting blink. Naturally, this is the exact moment someone knocks on the door. 3 sharp taps, no pause, just authority. You blink yourself upright, half expecting your knees to file for separate living quarters. A boy you haven't seen before peeks in. He's small, nervous, and holding a folded linen sheet. "Bath rotation," he squeaks. "You're on Basin duty." You stare at him for a moment, weighing your options. Run away and live among the goats? Feign unconsciousness? Claim to be a ghost? Number. You stand. The bathing chambers are tucked behind the kitchens, past the herb room, and through a door that creaks with such judgment it might as well speak. Inside, the room is warmer than expected. Stone floors are damp. A fire glows softly in the corner, heating water in iron kettles. Buckets line the wall. Wooden tubs, ringed with iron bands, sit waiting like wide-mouthed barrels of potential regret. Your job? Haul water, mix hot and cold, empty and refill. Repeat until your muscles whisper threats under their breath. You're handed a scoop ladle the size of a dinner plate and shown how to pour without splashing. Gently, they tell you, as if you're baptizing a squirrel. The first noble bather arrives, an older man with hair like goose down and a permanent scowl etched into his brow. He says nothing, just grunts and settles into the water like a disgruntled walrus. You pour. Slowly, steadily, trying not to make eye contact. The steam rises. The room smells of rosemary and boiled linen. It's almost calming, until he sneezes and half the tub sloshes onto your shoes. You nod politely. "Bless you, my lord." He grunts. 1 down. 5 to go. You continue the process, developing a rhythm. Haul, pour, cool, drain. Occasionally, someone complains the water is too hot, too cold, too wet, not wet enough, or smells faintly of parsnip. Historians still debate how often people in castles actually bathed. Some say weekly, others say only on feast days. Tonight, however, everyone seems suddenly committed to personal hygiene like their legacy depends on it. Halfway through your shift, a handmaid enters carrying a bundle of rose petals. She sprinkles them into a tub and whispers, "Lady Isolde prefers a floral soak." You smile. Naturally. She glances at your water bucket and says, "You'll need to fetch more. The soft barrel water, not the spigot." You sigh and head back out, this time to the rainwater barrels behind the castle walls. It's darker now. The wind has picked up. The stars glitter above, distant and uninterested. You pass a guard who nods, then continues trying to light his third failed torch. At the barrels, you lean in to scoop the water, and surprise, the castle cat is sleeping on the lid. She looks at you, blinks, yawns. You gently nudge her aside. She tolerates it, barely. Back inside, you finish preparing Lady Isolde's bath. She arrives swaddled in wool, surveys the tub like it owes her money, then finally nods and steps in. You pour rose-scented water carefully over her shoulders. She sighs. This is tolerable. High praise. You step back, let the handmaids take over, and begin draining one of the older tubs. It's a slow, sloshy process involving a bucket, a floor drain, and your will to live. Once the final bath ends, you're given a damp cloth to mop the floor. It's the cherry on top of a day that began with oat mush and a rat, and ended with soap bubbles and noble sighs. As you mop, another servant passes by and says, "You're doing better than most on their first day." You pause. "Really?" He shrugs. Well, you haven't cried in the laundry barrels yet. That's something. Fair enough. You're told to hang the towels by the fire to dry, and as you do, you find a moment, just a sliver of one, to enjoy the warmth. The fire pops. The last of the steam curls toward the rafters. The smell of rosemary still lingers in your sleeves. You carry the final bucket out into the courtyard to dump it. The air has turned sharp, like it's reminding you not to get too comfortable. The stars have shifted. The moon sits higher now, like a silver crown above the east turret. The castle feels different again, tired, breathing slower, settling into its bones. You trudge back inside. Your feet barely make sound now. You're part of the stone. A whisper wrapped in linen. Back in your chamber, the straw mat welcomes you like an old frenemy. The rat is asleep. You're jealous. You lie down. Just for a moment. The walls murmur with distant echoes. Pipes groaning. Doors creaking. Wind brushing past arrow slits. And you close your eyes. Tomorrow is another day. But you've earned this sliver of peace. And maybe, just maybe, you'll survive the next one, too. You wake not to the sound of birdsong, but to the distinct clang of a wooden spoon smacking against a metal pot. The rat is gone. The serenity also gone. The spoon clanging continues in the hallway, accompanied by a shout. Rise and shine, mold sniffers. Lord's up, so you're up. You roll off your straw mat in what can only be described as a controlled collapse. Every joint protest. Your back cracks like ancient parchment. Your left foot appears to have entered a secret alliance with the floor, refusing to lift on command. But you're up. Sort of. A new day in the castle dawns, and you're told immediately to report to the laundry. Laundry. You suppress a shiver, not because of fear. Because the laundry is cold. It's always cold. The castle's laundry area is tucked near the river-fed drainage trench, where drafts roam freely, and water is never quite warm enough to feel like a favor. When you arrive, 2 women are already scrubbing with soapy rags at a row of tunics that look like they've seen combat, and possibly a minor kitchen explosion. Your task? Stir the washing vats. Yes, vats. Giant wooden tubs filled with lye, ash water, and the faint scent of regret. You grab the stirring paddle, longer than you are tall, and begin turning the slop in a slow, sleepy circle. The steam curls upward. The smell is part soap, part mystery, part wet wool's long-term vengeance. A servant next to you mutters, "Don't splash." The burn marks don't impress anyone. Noted. You stir, and stir, and stir. You briefly wonder if your arms will just detach from your shoulders and float away like overcooked noodles. Eventually, you're upgraded to ringing. This is medieval for twist until your spine becomes a spiral staircase. The linen is heavy, soaked, and soapy. You twist it over the wooden trestle. Water pours out like an accusation. Historians still debate the hygiene of castle life. Some claim nobility insisted on spotless linens and fragrant oils. Others argue cleanliness was more of a strong suggestion. Judging by the state of today's laundry, it was more of a yearly ambition. While ringing, you're taught how to apply blue dye made from wood. A plant that smells like sweaty pickles but makes your clothes look fancy. You dab some accidentally on your wrist. A supervisor notices and says, "Congratulations, you're now marked for dye duty all week." Wonderful. Later, you help fold the dried items. A never-ending stack of tunics, hose, aprons, and handkerchiefs, some embroidered, some torn, all requiring folding methods that feel like a secret society ritual. You fail to properly pleat a double-folded chemise and are gently corrected by a woman named Alfreda, who has folded more linen than you've eaten hot meals. "You'll get it," she says, her tone forgiving, "or you won't. Either way, we keep folding." Somewhere in the courtyard, a bell rings for midday. You're allowed a break. The break consists of a crust of bread, a hunk of cheese, and what may once have been a pear. You eat it all with the quiet reverence of someone who's seen things. You find a small alcove to sit on. One that isn't damp or infested, much. From your little corner, you can see a falconer in the upper yard, sending a bird into the sky. It circles once, twice, then dives toward the fields. You wonder briefly what it might be like to be that bird, just for a day. No laundry, no trays, no ladders, just sky and wind, and the occasional regrettable squirrel. But you are not a falcon. You are the laundry staff, and the afternoon looms. You're sent next to the linen store, where you assist with the sacred ritual of inventory, which, in medieval terms, involves counting how many clean things are left, how many dirty things are pretending to be clean, and how many things have mysteriously vanished into the abyss. As you record numbers with a charcoal nub on parchment, a noble's page enters and demands a fresh tunic, unstained, mildly scented, no frills. You hand one over. He sniffs it, frowns, hands it back. You repeat this 4 more times. Eventually, he accepts the 5th one and mutters, "Adequate." It feels like winning a tournament. You finish the inventory. Just as you're about to leave, a hand grabs your shoulder. "The rushes in the great hall need changing," says a tired voice. "Ah, rush duty." The medieval version of vacuuming. If your vacuum were straw, herbs, dead bugs, and the occasional drop pie. You return to the hall, now empty of its feast guests, and begin sweeping away the rushes that covered the stone floor. They're meant to insulate, scent, and absorb. What they really do is hide crumbs, mice, and secrets. You toss the old rushes out into the yard and begin laying new ones. Reeds, sweet herbs, maybe a little lavender. It's an oddly peaceful task, until you find a chicken egg under one of the benches. Unbroken, still warm. You leave it where it is. You don't need that kind of responsibility today. As the sun begins to lower, the halls take on that familiar hush. People speak softer. Doors creak less. Fires are stoked, not built. Lanterns are lit. Shadows stretch. You finish the rushes, wipe your hands on your apron, and for the first time in hours, feel somewhat clean. You return to your chamber. The rat is back. But you don't mind. Tonight, it feels more like a roommate than a threat. You sit, not quite lying down. Not yet. You listen. To wind. To echoes. To your own heartbeat. Somehow, you're still here. Still surviving. And there's a strange kind of pride in that. You're almost too tired to move, but of course, you're not done yet. From the hallway, a voice calls, "Chapel duty," as if it's the most obvious thing in the world. You muster a groan, which is quickly followed by movement. In castle life, groaning is a luxury. Moving is mandatory. The castle chapel is small but beautiful, candlelit, quiet, smelling faintly of wax, damp stone, and dried thyme. The ceiling arches like a whisper. The stained glass windows catch the last light of day, painting soft reds and blues across the stone floor in gentle slants. You enter through the side and are immediately handed a brass censer. It's still warm from the last service. "Swing it 3 times per pass," says the deacon's assistant, "and try not to set your robe on fire." Duly noted. Your job tonight is to help prepare for the evening prayers, the final service before the castle goes to sleep. Everyone's tired. Even the saints in the tapestries look mildly annoyed. You help light the candles, all of them, dozens. Some tall, some stubby, some shaped like animals, with vague religious symbolism. One is a lion that's melted into something closer to a sad potato. You light it anyway. It deserves its moment. Next, you help roll out the prayer mats and gently dust the altar with a goose feather brush. Not because the altar is especially dirty, but because tradition says it must be tended with reverent hands. Yours are reverent and slightly blistered. As the castle staff trickle in, some kneeling, others just sitting quietly, you find yourself drifting into a rare moment of stillness. Even Sir Ulric is here. He bows his head, whispering something that sounds suspiciously like an apology to the gods for accidentally launching that goblet. The chapel hums with low chanting, the kind of chant that vibrates more in your chest than your ears. You don't know the words. You hum anyway. Historians still debate how central religion truly was to every part of castle life. Some argue it was the heart of daily routine. Others claim it was a duty observed more out of obligation than belief. Tonight, it feels like both. And neither. Just a space where even the overworked can briefly feel like they belong. After the prayers, you help snuff the candles. The room darkens with a sigh. A bell rings once. Evening bell. Official bedtime. You escort the last noble child back to their chamber, holding a small lantern that flickers with every draft. The child is drowsy, trailing a blanket that drags on the stone. "Do you believe angels live in the chapel?" she whispers. You smile. "Only the tired ones." She giggles once, then vanishes behind a heavy oak door. You take the long way back to your quarters, passing through the courtyard, under a sky now black as ink. A single torch sputters by the gate. Somewhere, a night watchman hums a tune without melody. You pause near the stable. A groom is brushing a horse. You nod to each other. No words, just nod. The horse flicks its ears and exhales warm mist into the night. By the time you reach your chamber, the castle has gone full hush. Every corridor seems padded. Every step is muted. You close the door gently behind you. The rat gives you a look like, "Rough one?" You nod. You crawl into your straw mat, not onto it, into it. You burrow like a medieval hedgehog and pull your cloak over your shoulders. The wind outside sings a soft lullaby through the narrow window slit. You listen. Then you count it like sheep. 1 guest, 2 guests, 3 dots. Your limbs feel heavier than your blanket. Your eyelids, not just drooping, closing shop for the night. In the last few seconds before sleep, your mind replays snippets of the day. The goblet catch, the rat, the soap-slick floors, Sir Ulric's goose toast, the lady's faint nod, the smell of rosemary steam. You did it. You really did it. Maybe not well, but with heart, and in a castle, that's what counts. You awaken to the scent of burnt oats and the unmistakable clatter of pewter bowls being stacked far too loudly for this hour. Except you don't need to move. Not yet. No one's calling your name. No one's tapping you for wood duty or moat patrol or surprise embroidery inventory. For the first time, it feels like you might actually rest. Until a knock. Of course, you suppress every curse you've learned since arriving and mumble, "Coming." It's a stable hand at the door. "We need another body for market escort duty. One of the lads twisted his ankle chasing a goat. You're up." You blink at him. "I know nothing about markets." "Perfect." He grins. "You'll blend in." After pulling on your least damp tunic and boots that have clearly lost a fight with the rain, you make your way to the outer gate, where a small party is loading up supplies, bolts of cloth, dried herbs, and a basket of slightly dented apples. You're handed a long staff for appearance and told to look taller if possible. The market is in a village just outside the castle's walls, close enough to reach by foot, but far enough that the wind feels bolder and the sky more expansive. As you walk, a faint mist begins to fall. The road smells of wet leaves and recently disgruntled geese. The village comes into view like a watercolor. Smoky roofs, meandering goats, and stalls that lean slightly in every direction. Your job? Stand near the herbalist's table and look trustworthy. So naturally, you knock over a rack of lavender bundles within the first 3 minutes. They forgive you. Mostly. While straightening the baskets, you overhear murmurs about castle life, peasants gossiping about the latest banquet, whether the Lord has a new mistress, and if that really was a ghost in the East Corridor last Thursday. You smile. They have no idea you were the one who knocked over the tapestry that mysteriously moved. You help weigh dried mint, pack vials of rose oil, and hand out samples of something called boar balm that smells like sadness and rosemary. The market bustles. Children chase chickens between stalls. A man juggles onions. A woman sells ink made from walnut husks and disappointment. You realize something strange. This is kind of nice. You're outside. No one's yelling. You've eaten 2 whole apples and no one's claimed them back. Historians still argue about the exact role of castle servants during market days. Some claim it was strictly for supply duty. Others suggest nobles used it as a reward, or even a subtle punishment. Based on your current workload, it might be both. After the market, you return to the castle with slightly lighter baskets and significantly wetter socks. The stable hand claps you on the back. Not bad. You only broke 2 things. That's a record. Back inside, the castle is in mid-afternoon mode. Servants rushing to prepare for the evening meal. A bard tuning his lute suspiciously off-key. And the steward assigning dinner rotations like he's hosting a dinner party for 200 guests and exactly 3 knives. You're told to help polish silver. You assume they mean forks and goblets. They mean wall sconces and a ceremonial chamber pot. You polish and polish and briefly hallucinate your reflection winking back at you in a pewter tray. After silver duty, you're sent to help with guest smoothing, which turns out to be a process of strategically placing fancier cushions on benches and lighting candles in places that make the hall look wealthier than it is. You manage to drop only one candle. The wax hits your boot, but the fire spares your toes. You take this as divine approval. Evening draws near. The final feast of the day looms. You're back in the kitchen, helping ladle something brown into trenchers. The cook calls it lambish, which you choose not to investigate. This time, you eat before serving. It's a game changer. You're not ravenous, not clumsy, and only mildly sleep-deprived. You serve stew, dodge elbows, and avoid making eye contact with the steward entirely. At one point, Lady Isolde snaps her fingers and gestures at her goblet. You refill it. She nods. Progress. The feast ends without major injury or incident. A man nearly chokes on a carrot, but recovers after someone punches his back and yells, "Out, demon!" You help clear the hall, humming under your breath. The hall empties. The candles flicker low. The bard packs up and mutters something about finding a better castle gig. You're nearly done for the night when someone calls, "Wait, who's on candle snuffing?" You are, obviously. You make your rounds, snuffing each flame with care. 1, 2, 12, 30. Each puff of smoke rises like a sleepy dragon sigh. The castle dims around you. Quieter, softer, more forgiving. You walk back through the corridor, past armor that now looks more decorative than deadly, tapestries that feel more like blankets than history lessons. Your room awaits. You pause at the door. You exhale. Then you step inside. You close the door behind you with a slow push. It makes its usual soft thud. The sound now familiar, almost comforting. No clanging pots, no yelling stewards, no nobles demanding warm meals at midnight. Just you and the rat, who is again asleep, this time in your shoe. You choose to take that as a compliment. There's only a small sliver of wax left in your candle stub. You light it anyway, watching the flame flicker, casting shadows against the uneven stone walls of your tiny chamber. The glow softens everything. Your bedroll, the pile of folded linens in the corner, even your face reflected faintly in a polished scrap of bronze hanging from a nail. You sit for a moment on the edge of your straw mat, then lie back. Slowly. Every joint has something to say, but you hush them with a long, slow exhale. Your limbs stretch out like you're taking up more space than you actually do. The blanket, scratchy and worn, feels almost luxurious tonight. The room is quiet. No footsteps. No bells. Just the soft creak of beams above and the rustling of night wind slipping through the shutter cracks. Then, just as your eyes begin to drift shut, a knock. Again? You open the door to find a page boy holding a rolled parchment. He hands it over. Someone said you were literate. You are. Sort of. You open it. It's a summons to the Lord Solar. tonight. Now you glance at the boy. Why? He shrugs. Didn't ask. You toss your blanket aside, put your boots on, slowly, and follow him through the winding passages. The torches on the walls have burned low. The flame light dances in crooked angles. Finally, you reach the solar. You're let in with barely a glance by a yawning guard. The sun is warmer than expected. It smells of parchment, honeyed wine, and, oddly, fresh herbs. The Lord is there, so is Lady Isolde, a few knights, and the steward who eyes you with the suspicion of a man who never forgets a spilled soup. A parchment is unrolled on the long oak table. It's a map. The Lord gestures to it. We're expanding the western orchard. Need someone who knows how to inventory goods, track cloth bolts, and scrub rushes in a straight line. You blink. Me? He nods. You've lasted 4 whole days without crying or quitting. That's impressive. Lady Isolde chimes in. Also, you fold linen tolerably well. One of the knights adds, and you pour rose water like a trained squirrel. You aren't sure if any of this is praise, but you nod anyway. The Lord continues. You'll have a new post. More quiet. Better straw. Fewer goblets flying near your face. You say, that would be appreciated. He waves a hand. Go sleep. We'll send for you tomorrow. You bow. It's not elegant, but it's sincere. As you leave, the steward mutters something that sounds vaguely like, well earned, and that alone could carry you home. The halls are colder now, but you don't feel it. Your body is tired. Your spirit, slightly less trampled. You reach your chamber again and find the rat has moved to the warm spot you just left. Fair enough. You lie down again, finally, for the last time tonight. Your eyes close. For real. And for a moment, you just listen. To the fire popping softly 2 chambers away. To the wind tracing the crenellations above. To your breath. To the castle, huge, heavy, and ancient, settling into sleep like everyone else. Wind down. 300 words. You made it. From dawn's frost to midnight's hush. Through spilled porridge, soap-slicked tiles, and stern nights with no sense of humor, you lived a full medieval castle day. And somehow, you didn't perish from it. Now, let it all fade. Let the weight in your limbs grow heavier. Let the straw beneath you become softer. Let the aches and blisters dissolve into warmth, like wax melting into a puddle of calm. Inhale. The scent of rosemary still clings faintly to your sleeves. You feel the cool stone nearby, grounding and solid. You hear, somewhere far off, the wind brushing across battlements. A lullaby written by weather and age. Exhale. You picture the castle beyond your small chamber. The torches dimmed. The kitchens are dark. The horses slept in their stalls. Even the ghosts, if they exist, are tiptoeing tonight. You are not a servant anymore. Not a linen folder. Not a stew carrier. Not a rush layer or chamber pot cleaner. You are a dreamer. Wandering these ancient halls on silent feet, whispering through stone corridors, brushing fingertips against ancient tapestries, all without stirring a soul. You've earned this rest. Let the last images flicker gently behind your eyes. Moonlight on stone, steam in the bathhouse, the glint of candlelight on pewter. Nothing more is required of you tonight. No more tasks, no more steps. Only sleep, only peace. Only you, breathing quietly in a world long gone, yet softly echoing still. Good night, traveler of time. You survived the castle. Now, drift away. Sweet dreams.